Yep.
And I'll use this as a segue to talk about recruiting. But, KU now is 3-0, and they won, and K-State didn't on Saturday. And I think that's pretty notable that KU goes on the road and starts 3-0 with back-to-back road wins, and Kansas State loses to, Tulane. So how does this impact local recruiting, do you think? Because I think for me, actually, I'll let you go first and I'll get my take after because I'm curious what you think.
I did think it was kind of funny after last night's game. There were a couple KU staff members liking tweets from Avery Johnson and Dylan Edwards and guys like that. And so no, it kind of cracked me up. Like, hey, we it feels kind of like the "you up" text message that you send out at like 1 a.m. or whatever, just sort of a shot in the dark type of thing. But no, I think it does have an impact to start it and everything else. And Michael, I know you were there for this conversation. I'm not going to name the person's name, but there was a top recruit in the 2023 class. And when we were talking to his father, one of the things that he had said basically was, if we're staying in state, we know who the better in-state school is. We know who the big dog is. We know where we should send him basically to play his college football. And I think I look at something like that, and I think that's where this stuff changes. It's not like all of a sudden, you're going to open your door and everybody's going to walk in.
No.
But I do think that for a lot of guys this year, the door was already shut. And I think that that's one of the things that a lot of people have trouble understanding about this 2023 class, because they look at it and they say, well, gosh, it's the best Kansas class, in a generation, maybe longer. And Kansas doesn't have a commit from an in-state guy. And I understand that frustration. Certainly I do. But I think that when you look at when Leipold took over, the time that it took for them to start making sort of some of those local inroads with guys, and I'm not saying they're perfect on that end, but I am saying that even as of last fall, when these 2023 guys were still juniors, a lot of them had already been in contact with K-State for a while, and they'd seen K-State winning for a while, and they hadn't seen Kansas winning for a while. And so even with some of these guys who might have visited Kansas or, engaged in conversations with the coaches and things like that, I think it was always kind of, well, I'm being nice by doing this, as opposed to the door being legitimately open for the University of Kansas to recruit me. And I think that this is a really long answer, but I do think that that's where things start to change. It's not, okay, Kansas is winning now, 2024, it's on. Kansas is going to get, 7 top 10 players. What it is saying is that before, if you look at recruiting as a ladder, and the top of the ladder is the commitment, like Kansas State was starting up here with the 2023 guys. Kansas might not have even been on the ladder, for some of these guys. And I think that that's some of the stuff that's going to change. And when you look at 2024, it is a little bit of a down class, I think, and it looks really down compared to 2023, but I think it's a little bit down. 2025, we're already starting to find guys, Michael. 2026, we've already got like 8 or 9 guys that
make me feel old. Oh my God.
And that doesn't happen in Kansas. And so when you start to see guys that early, that's when you sort of start to say, okay, this could be a really good class. Because in some cases, those aren't even the top guys yet. They're just the guys that we've seen or noticed so far. And so I guess to wrap up that super long answer really quickly, I think it certainly helps. And I think when you look at 2024 and somebody that you've talked to specifically who is open to Kansas and BJ Kennedy, when you look at guys, even beyond Kennedy, I think there were guys who maybe said, okay, if KU and K-State recruit me, I'm going to K-State because it's the only real option. I think the difference now is people are going to look at Kansas and say that's an actual legitimate option for me to go and play college football.
Exactly. And so there's a lot of really good stuff there that I want to hit on. I think a lot of recruiting is perception.
Sure.
A lot of it is. You're dealing with kids, right?
Yeah.
Guys that grew up in the state of Kansas watching football. And so I think for so long, Kansas, the perception of the program has not been good. And rightfully so. It's just been bad. And so what Kansas is fighting against right now is a decade of being a doormat. And I think that some of the coaches have talked about it publicly. I think people on the program have talked about it privately too, that when a kid commits to Kansas and they walk into school wearing the Kansas hoodie, it's, oh man, you're going to Kansas? Really? And that's what they have to fight against. When these guys walk into high school and their friends are poking fun at KU. And so a season like this does a lot to change the public perception of a program like this, because you're looking at a program that's been, again, like the laughingstock of college football for so long. And all of a sudden now, who you can't tell a joke because they're kicking butt, literally. And so
Yeah.
I think that a win like this and a weekend like this does a lot for the perception of the program within the state, even within the Kansas City area. I think that I continue to go back to Iowa State because I think it's a very, very good comparison. Obviously, two
Sure.
really, kind of programs that have had success in years past, but kind of fell into mediocrity over the last decade. Iowa State's best season in program history was 2020. Iowa State's 2021 recruiting class, the class that kind of commits during that time, right? Traditionally, Iowa State did not recruit in-state talent. Iowa was the program that got the in-state kids, right? They're the program that was known. And Iowa State had to fight against that. And then all of a sudden, you get a class where you get a kid like Hunter Deo, a 4-star. Then, you get basically out of the top 6 guys, Iowa State got 3, and Iowa got 2, and Notre Dame got 1. It takes a season like this where if you project it out long term, where you say, okay, is Kansas bowl eligible? We'll get to that question in a second. But, if Kansas wins 5 games and K-State falls flat just in terms of the perception of the program going into the season, right? Because going into the year, K-State was known as a program that is the dark horse. That's not a dark horse at all. It's like Iowa State last year, right? The program that everyone acts as, oh, that's my dark horse pick when everyone's picking them. So I think weekends like this are huge. I don't know how much of an impact it will have on 2023. I think a lot of these guys are wedded to their school in terms of the commitment. I think Calvin Clemens is kind of the one guy really that you can look at in terms of the in-state class, because, obviously Baylor is super talented and they're going to continue to recruit high-level offensive linemen. And him being a Lawrence guy, I know it was a really close decision, and KU did really everything they could. I mean, heck, the kid talked to Bill Self. Like, they don't do that very often with guys. And so KU pulled out all the stops, and I think that was a battle. And I wonder if a season like this can maybe change that perception. And if things happen at Baylor, maybe that happens. I don't expect it to happen, though. And so you look at the 2024 class, and you named him, B.J. Kennedy, a guy that grew up as a KU fan. Now, that doesn't mean much, right? Samuel Samé grew up as a KU fan. He's going to Iowa State now. And it doesn't mean much in the end, but it opens the door, like you said. And I think that, again, weekends like this really help make it easier for a kid like that to commit to Kansas, because, again, when they walk into high school, it's not jokes. That's cool. That program's on the rise, right? And so I think that's a really big deal. Do you have any more thoughts on that?
No, I think we could probably do a whole podcast on
And
local
we will at
recruiting.
some point.
Yeah, and hit a lot of these. But no, I thought you hit a lot of it. And I think when you look at Kennedy specifically and recruitments like that, like we saw Amani Bledsoe a few years ago, loved KU, loved their pitch, come be a local, hometown hero, was a Lawrence kid, wound up going to Oklahoma, and it was very tough for him to say no to Kansas. But where Kansas was, I think it was still a tough choice. But I think if Kansas had been in a spot where it is now, it would have made it maybe the option for him. Maybe Kansas gets that kid. And that's the thing you worry about with Kennedy, who, has been ranked as a 4-star kid, according to 24/7 Sports, is when you when you look at Kennedy, like he loves KU now, but you stretch, and he loved KU growing up, but you stretch that recruiting process out. Other schools start to come in, quote unquote, big football schools start to offer. What makes him choose Kansas? And I think that hope is what
Yeah,
makes him choose
exactly.
Kansas. The fact that belief makes him choose Kansas. And the fact that he believes that, hey, if I choose Kansas, I'm not going to be languishing for 4 years now. We're going to win. I'm going to have a great, college experience, potentially go to the NFL, if my development and everything works out right. And I think that that's where this helps is
Hmm.
the fact that Kennedy, he likes Kansas. Like you said, he grew up a Kansas fan. But I think that as that recruiting process goes on, a lot of times guys like that, they'd look at it and they'd be like, I like Kansas. I really want to go there. I like the coaches, but I just can't go somewhere where I'm going to be 3-9 the rest of my life. And,
Yeah.
and I think that that's where this helps.